breaking news, there is a new special passport for Americans. And any moment, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will take the podium and tell you about it. We're going to take you live when he begins to speak. Plus, you think you know a lot about President Trump, but did he go to medical school?
Have you or someone you know been diagnosed with TDS? The symptoms can be relentless. Fortunately, I'm Dr. Trump, and I have a treatment plan.
Oh, there is so much more to this video, and you will see it all later in the show. Here's a hint. His critics will not like it. Also ahead, a real doctor gets summoned to Capitol Hill by another real doctor. Senator Dr. Rand Paul has subpoenaed Dr. Anthony Fauci. These two doctors have been feuding, and now Senator Paul wants Fauci under oath. Senator Paul joins me in a few minutes. Also, a horrifying explosion caught on camera. Oh, brother, what happened to those firefighters? We have an update on that. I'm Greta Van Susteren. This is The Record. There is one person who does not care how hot it is this weekend. The party will go on.
By the way, on July 4th, it's going to be approximately 107 degrees out. And I'm going to go and I'm going to make a really long speech just to show that I can do anything.
Well, you heard it. He said that he can do anything. So on our nation's 250th anniversary, President Donald Trump will be leading a big rally here in Washington. Our nation's capital is not the only town suffering from Mother Nature's wrath. Nearly 200 million Americans are under heat alerts. We're going to have the forecast for you in just a few moments. Also today in our nation's capital, do not mess with U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro or America's landmarks.
They are an affront to the dignity of our shared history, and we will not allow our sacred monuments to be roped off, defaced, or diminished, or in any way impacted by disgruntled individuals who think that they, and not the rest of the nation, have the right to decide what should happen.
Pirro was speaking after a suspect was indicted by a grand jury for damaging the reflecting pool on the mall here in Washington. The charge? Felony destruction of property. The suspect is David Hearn. Hearn is a former Olympian. He was in the Olympics for canoeing. He's accused of reaching into the reflecting pool and damaging the newly painted bottom of the pool. Hearn has told other media outlets that he was just curious. He said he was just touching part of the pool's floor. If convicted of this felony, he faces 10 years in prison. And we have a flashback. Remember this?
The accusation being circulated that I influenced these scientists to change their minds by bribing them with millions of dollars in grant money is absolutely false and simply preposterous.
That is, of course, Dr. Anthony Fauci. He was testifying about the coronavirus and allegations about a COVID cover-up. Now Dr. Fauci has been subpoenaed to testify again. Kentucky Republican and chairman of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, Senator Rand Paul joins me. Nice to see you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Senator, what do you want to ask Dr. Fauci?
Well, you know, we've been through 2 million bits of information that was kept hidden from us from the Biden administration, but Secretary Kennedy and the Trump administration have been very forthcoming. We've looked at a lot of exchanges, a lot of communications, and we now have evidence that not only did Dr. Fauci lie about funding gain-of-function research in China, he also asked others to destroy records. He destroyed federal records himself, and this is also a felony. We need to ask him about that. We also have questions about the pardon. No venue has asked him any questions about the pardon. We need to know, did he engage the pardons? What crime did he think that he needed protection from? And so there's quite a few questions that we have to ask. We had wanted him to come in voluntarily. He had initially agreed, but then last week or about 2 weeks ago, decided that he would not come in unless he was subpoenaed.
Is this an open hearing or will this be a deposition behind closed doors?
This will be a public hearing, and There'll be both Republicans and Democrats there. He'll be given a chance to make an opening statement, and then he'll be questioned. But there are some real legitimate questions. I mean, what kind of scientist decides to fund research in a totalitarian country, gain-of-function research, where you take two viruses, you combine them to make a virus not known in nature, and then try to infect human cells with it? There's a great deal of evidence. The CIA now concludes, the Department of Energy concludes, and the FBI all conclude that the evidence points towards this coming from a lab. And yet Fauci for years has been saying, oh, no, it came from a marketplace. Well, we discovered emails where in January of 2020, he actually knew that the first people that got this disease were not at the marketplace, but actually pre-existed the marketplace. That the marketplace was a spreader event, but it was not the origin. And this is a big deal that he kept this hidden from the public. It is a big deal that he also did give an $8 million grant to a couple of scientists who privately were saying, oh, it looks like it was manipulated in a lab, looks like a lab leak. But then publicly they said the opposite once they received an $8 million grant from Anthony Fauci. So he has a lot to explain.
All right, I did not know or think that the coronavirus was a gain-of-function virus. I thought that was a separate virus. Am I wrong on that? Was coronavirus a created gain-of-function virus?
Gain-of-function just describes a type of experiment where what happens is you take one known virus and maybe one unknown virus, you take parts of them, put them together, and then grow them in human cells to see if they gain in function. Anthony Fauci has argued, well, if you don't know in advance they're going to gain in function, then you can't really call it gain of function. But they did know, and they continued to do these experiments in Wuhan, even when the evidence from the experiments was showing that it was gaining in function. We also know that animal viruses don't infect humans very well. When they first make the jump to humans, they don't go human to human very well. COVID, the moment it took off, the moment humans were infected with this virus, it infected humans better than any animals. This indicates a virus that has been pre-adapted for humans. It's a great part of the evidence is that this virus went human to human with no problems immediately, and the whole world became so infected because it was a virus that had been pre-adapted in the lab to be more infectious to human. That is the gain of function.
Well, if you go back to January 14, 2020, WHO tweeted, I'll never forget this tweet. It said that according to the Chinese that COVID was not transmittable from human to human, which of course turned out not to be true. Was the spread of this COVID virus, was it an accidental or a deliberate spread? I mean, when it originated wherever, out of the lab.
Yeah, I think most likely accidental. I can't tell you with a certainty, but I would say most likely accidental, because if a country wanted to create something as a weapon, they'd be unlikely to release it in their own country. Wuhan's a city of 15 million people. We're not sure it's advisable to get viruses 8 hours away, 300 feet underground in a bat cave and take them back to a city of 15 million people. We also think the lab was not up to snuff. It was a BSL-2 lab for much of this and not a BSL-4 lab, which is the higher rating. So there's a lot of reasons why this shouldn't have been done and that mistakes were made. But ultimately, we think what happened is they were trying to create a vaccine possibly with a new virus that they had created, a live virus, but then that virus got out and infected lab workers. Intelligence reports from 2019 have 3 people in Dr. Xi's lab getting sick. They actually know the names. They published the names of the 3 scientists who got sick in November of 2019. The Chinese still deny this, but the Chinese also say, oh, well, COVID-19 was never in our lab. We don't have any samples that match it. But that would be, you'd have to trust the Chinese to be honest about this. And if it came out of China, I think there's no way in the world they would be honest or that their government would let them live. We know that the one scientist who did create the vaccine mysteriously died falling from a tall building in Beijing in April of 2020.
The first time I heard gain of function was years ago when President Obama put a moratorium on gain-of-function research or testing. Then I don't know what happened to it until all of a sudden COVID. Then I started to learn a whole lot more. Is there a legitimate reason to do gain-of-function research? I get it that doing it in a communist country isn't too smart, but is there a legitimate reason to do gain-of-function research?
I don't think there is. There's been some controversy over this. Anthony Fauci wrote in an op-ed in 2011 that even if a pandemic should occur from gain-of-function research, that the knowledge is worth the risk. Many scientists don't think the knowledge is worth the risk. We've never created a vaccine from gain-of-function research. They've done things like take the avian flu, which doesn't go human to human well or at all, and they've put in 8 mutations to make it transmissible not only human to human, but through the air. So this is something that, you know, the purpose, it's sort of like being Dr. Frankenstein and doing these kind of things. There is no good purpose for this. It's incredibly dangerous. And the purpose is to take an animal virus and try to make it more infectious to humans. It's a death wish, but it's not a death wish for a handful of people. It could be the death wish for the entire planet. We have things like Ebola that aren't readily transmitted by aerosol. If you change it and mutate it on purpose to make it aerosolized, if Ebola were aerosolized, you would risk 50% of the planet dying. As bad as COVID was, it was 1% of the American population. 50%, you would have people dying by the tens of thousands just from lack of doctors, lack of sanitation, lack of clean water. I mean, you would devastate the planet. So we shouldn't be doing these experiments.
Well, I've always been more afraid of gain-of-function viruses, and I have a ballistic missile because you can see the ballistic missile coming at least, and not so with the virus. Anyway, Senator Rand Paul, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And coming up, the expected wedding of the century between pop artist Taylor Swift and Kansas City Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce. It's ruffling some feathers. Plus, President Trump is playing doctor. Find out what disease he says he has the cure for. That when the record continues.
Larry was in a really bad accident and broke his neck. In the line of duty.
I get a phone call early one morning from the Tunnel Towers Foundation. Said, we're going to provide you and your family with a smart home. At that time, I just almost just passed out. I just couldn't believe it.
They heard his story, which means someone's out there listening.
By giving $11 a month, you're joining us on our mission to do good. Go to T2T.org now.
Hello, everyone. It's President Donald J. Trump, and it's Trump time. Check out this red beauty. It's one of my new watches. Wear it proudly on your wrist, and everyone will know exactly what it's for, who it represents. It's really going to be something special. It's for your favorite president. Get your watch today at GetTrumpWatches.com. Please make a great gift. It's Trump time.
Your mouthwash routine just got a whole lot smarter. Use Smart Mouth Activated Morning Mouthwash with B12 for all-day bad breath prevention. Guaranteed. If your mouthwash isn't activated, it's not Smart Mouth. Kickstart your morning. Get Smart Mouth Activated Mouthwash with B12.
Don't kibble your dog.
Hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, back.
What's wrong with this?
Let's check it out. It's still kibble, which means they're ultra-processed. At Dr. Marty, we freeze-dry premium meats, fruits, and vegetables, and it's available at your local pet store.
If you grew up in New York, you knew he was an asshole and a liar from day one.
He's such a mean, nasty, hateful person. I never play him as an actor because I can't see any good in him. Nothing.
He was like a bug. He just kept being there. He was like a bug right there. Zzz.
Rosie O'Donnell, Robert De Niro, and Whoopi Goldberg are some of the big-name celebrities who have criticized President Trump. Trump and his supporters say these critics have TDS, or Trump Derangement Syndrome. Now the president is poking fun at them in an AI-generated video.
Have you or someone you know been diagnosed with TDS? The symptoms can be relentless. Fortunately, I'm Dr. Trump, and I have a treatment plan. Let's hear what some of my patients have to say.
I have been suffering for over a decade, and after listening to Dr. Trump, I can see some results. I really thought I was a lost cause. This was going to affect me for the rest of my life. But after using the treatment plan, I can see a difference.
I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Constantly angry. I made everyone miserable around me.
The treatment is simple. Turn off fake news. Say your prayers, and if you ever feel anxious, just have a Diet Coke like me, and you're going to see a remarkable difference in your life.
Again, that was an AI-generated ad with President Trump having some fun with his critics. But in reality, Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker has accused the president of having a serious medical issue.
He says they're the greatest threat to the country since its founding, and he said that includes World War I, World War II, Pearl Harbor, and 9/11.
Look, the man is continually suffering from dementia. I don't think he really understands what he's saying.
In response, a White House spokesperson said, quote, J.B. Pritzker is a slob and an incompetent governor who pushes blatantly false narratives like this in a desperate attempt to stay relevant, end quote. And turning to another topic, the New York Police Department is on high alert this week for the 4th of July celebrations. Officials say police officers will work 12-hour shifts as they operate in a, quote, heightened threat environment. Today, New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani touted crime reduction in the city. He rightfully praised NYPD officers for their work. The mayor was also asked about the couple who yesterday climbed to the top of the Empire State Building. New York Police Chief Michael LePetri said this.
So they are being charged with felonies, and I want to, our detective squad did a phenomenal job enhancing that arrest. Unacceptable, and there's going to be consequences.
But 4th of July events are not the only thing on people's radar in the Big Apple. Many are preparing for the rumored Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce wedding at Madison Square Garden. Though the NYPD is not confirming the wedding, New York Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis is not happy with the big wedding. She said, quote, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce should reimburse NYPD for the 130 officers needed per day to keep their multi-million-dollar 1,000-person wedding at Madison Square Garden safe. Our officers are already working overtime for 4th of July festivities, and New York City taxpayers should not be on the hook, end quote. Republican Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis of New York joins me. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
First of all, do you have any confirmation the wedding's happening? It looks pretty much like the wedding's happening, but no one will admit it.
Yeah, I'm just basing my comments on what's out in the Twitter sphere, like everybody else. You know, I just, to me, first of all, they couldn't have picked a worse day to be in New York City. There is so much going on. We have the FIFA World Cup. We have all those fan zones and watch parties. Then you have the America 250 events. We're going to have the big sale, hundreds of ships coming through New York Harbor. We're going to have the vice president's going to be in town. And then you have the Macy's fireworks and parades and, you know, the hot dog eating contest in Coney Island. There's a lot to keep our police officers busy. And this obviously adds to it. And the cops are already working overtime, as you mentioned, 12-hour shifts that they're working right now, keeping our city safe. I'm sure they can handle this event as well. That's not the issue. The issue is that they are being stretched thin and they are being overworked and underpaid, quite frankly.
And you left out one thing, the heat this weekend, because I imagine New York is going to be as bad as it is here in D.C. But tell me, how does this differ? I mean, the whole issue, I don't know if Taylor Swift, let's assume they're getting married, but I don't know if they asked for added protection. It's something that the city has been, quite benevolent to try to help, people in the city. But typically you have lots of big events. You've got the Knicks were a big event. Is this somehow different than what we do to the police officers when the Knicks have big parades or have protests?
Yeah, look, I mean, the difference I think here is that this is a private event. This is a private 1,000-person event. This is not, a public sporting event or a public parade or something where the NYPD obviously, without question, would be protecting. I think there was probably some type of arrangement made, some type of request made for added security. But we're talking about 130 cops, right, that are already working overtime. They've got to be exhausted, but they're doing the great work that they do, knowing that our NYPD, by the way, is thousands of cops short. they have thousands of cops less today, fewer cops today than they did on September 11, 2001. And I don't remember the last time we've had so many different events taking place in New York City in just like one weekend like this. This is really something, it is special. I mean, this is the 250th birthday of our country. There's a lot of festivities taking place all around, plus the World Cup, and as I mentioned, and some of the other stuff. So this is, I think, one of these more difficult times. Now, hopefully we won't have any type of energy issues like a brownout or something like that that could add to the complication and make it even more difficult and challenging for our first responders. And let's also remember that Zohran Mamdani has told everyone to keep their thermostat at 78 degrees. So I don't know if Travis and Taylor know that maybe MSG will be at 78 degrees throughout the entire wedding.
I think also sometimes people forget police officers. They're a lot like us in the sense that they have stresses at home. They might have a sick relative or something like that. And their tempers are sort of raw. You know, a lot of them, you know, we really are asking a lot of our officers often. And so, but let's hope for a very safe weekend. And the NYPD is, you know, it's a great police force. Anyway, Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, and thank you to the NYPD.
Indeed. Now, as the Congresswoman just mentioned, New York City's Mayor Zohran Mamdani facing backlash for his response to the heat wave cooking the Big Apple. He said in part, quote, "New York, it is hot out there and the power grid is working overtime to keep us cool. Set your AC to 78 degrees, turn off lights, electronics you're not using, and unplug what you can," end quote. The New York mayor's post quickly went viral with over 41 million views. Republican Congressman Brandon Gill of Texas chimed in on the mayor's post saying, quote, "Welcome to socialism, where the government demands you turn your house into a sauna because they can't plan for the super unpredictable fact that it tends to get hot in the summer," end quote. Now, before we get too overheated, Mamdani isn't the first American politician asking people to regulate the thermostat. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter did the same thing. Here he is addressing the nation about conserving energy.
All of us must learn to waste less energy. Simply by keeping our thermostats, for instance, at 65 degrees in the daytime and 55 degrees at night, we could save half the current shortage of natural gas.
President Carter received tons of criticism from Republicans for this speech. Republicans called it a symbol of, quote, defeatist. But Republican presidents Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford have also made similar calls. In 1973, Republican Nixon asked Americans to lower their thermostats by at least 6 degrees. And 1 year later, in 1974, Republican President Ford asked Americans to, quote, drive less, heat less, end quote. Meteorologist Julia Fife joins me. Julia, what can we expect across the country this weekend?
Greta, it is going to be hot. I hope you're staying cool. My current reading in D.C. right now, it feels like 109 degrees. But I could say it's not much better here in New York City. Feeling like 105 currently. Again, that's adding in that humidity. Here's those current temperatures. 98 right now in New York. We did hit 100 degrees at around 2 o'clock this afternoon. That was the first time New York City has reached triple digits since 2012. Current air temperature in D.C., 101 degrees. You can see widespread 90s across the eastern portion of the U.S. We're going to stick with those heat alerts through July 4th. Extreme heat warnings in place all the way from Missouri up until Maine. That means feels like temperatures have the potential to get over 110 degrees and not much relief through the overnight. Another issue with this heat, especially if you live in those highly populated areas, is going to be air quality. So they've issued an air quality alert for DC, Philly, New York, including Boston as well. Anytime you have that ridge of high pressure, traps the heat and all that pollution. So if you have any respiratory issues, definitely going to want to stay inside, especially with all this heat as well. And this is a dangerous situation. A lot of people aren't aware that heat is the #1 weather-related killer in terms of weather, more than flooding, tornadoes, and hurricanes combined. So if you do have to be outdoors, make sure you're taking frequent breaks, wear that light, loose-fitting clothing, and of course, stay hydrated. We also have storms on radar. So anytime we have all this fuel for that instability, that does cause those storms to develop. You can see where that ridge is kind of turning in that counterclockwise rotation. That started to put some instability over portions of the mid-south. We've got some active severe thunderstorm warnings in Tennessee and Mississippi as well. And then we have those ridge riders that are riding along the ridge, along the jet stream. We have some active tornado warnings in Wisconsin and South Dakota right now. Again, a tornado warning means we're seeing that rotation on radar. We'll have to wait for the preliminary reports to see if it actually touched the ground. But if you live in those areas, please use extra caution. Again, there's a lot of heat in the atmosphere, which leads to a lot of instability. We've got that threat all the way from Kansas stretching into the northeast, and then we've got that bullseye over the mid-south again, where that high pressure is churning in that moisture off the coast. And as we head into the weekend, as that ridge starts to break down, that does mean that we have more storm chances. So DC, it's a big weekend. We're still keeping an eye on the forecast. Tomorrow, 104, but guys, it's going to be feeling like 112 degrees. It's just going to be sunny, could see an isolated shower, but I think for the most part, you guys are going to be dry. And like I said, by the time we get to the 4th, that's when that ridge breaks down. Still going to be very hot, 101 degrees for the 4th of July, but heading into the afternoon and evening, that's when we can start to see an isolated severe thunderstorm. So make sure you're staying weather aware. There's going to be a lot of fireworks going on. Again, I don't think it's going to be a washout, but there are going to be hit or miss thunderstorms around the DC area. So if you are there, make sure you have several ways to get alerts. Greta?
Julia, what ends this? I mean, it's not going to be 102, forever. But I mean, what is the meteorological event that ends this heat for this long weekend?
Well, the good news is, like I said, that ridge is breaking down. And anytime you have a ridge that powerful, it just moves so slowly, which is why we've had that prolonged heat. That's finally going to move off, and then we're going to get some relief from the heat once we start to get some of those thunderstorms on Saturday. We don't want thunderstorms, but it is going to start cooling us off. We're going to get a pattern change, finally getting some cooler temperatures.
Indeed. Thank you, Julia Fife. And of course, elderly, sick, and pets, make sure you take care of them this weekend from this heat. Watch out for them. Coming up, a shocking discovery in Ohio. That one, the record continues.
Whoever trusted me in the car with this has made a terrible mistake. Yep, us kids can really make a mess of summer. I can get sand in places you didn't even know your car had. So, my parents got smart and decked out the car with WeatherTech. Now it's basically me-proof in here. Yep, summer's here. And I'm probably gonna spill every road snack and red slushie I can get my stubby little fingers on. So, visit WeatherTech.com to kid-proof your car for summer.
Hey, I'm Dr. Drupinski. I've been a physician for 4 decades. I've been looking at the aging process for a long time, and Fatty 15 is one product that actually slows it down. Fatty 15 comes out of Navy dolphin research. A brilliant veterinarian realized that dolphins get disease much like humans. She looked at what predisposed to those problems, isolated the molecule, gave it to the animals, they didn't get the problem. Without the C15, our cells become fragile and age and oxidize. This pushes that back. Cell health equals physical health. That's why I take Fatty 15.
For 250 years, America has depended on the courage of those who serve. They've defended our freedom and helped us become the nation we are today. At Wounded Warrior Project, we honor the past by building a better future for post-9/11 veterans, service members, and their families. They've given us their best. Join us in supporting them through the next 250 years of strength and resilience. Visit woundedwarriorproject.org/USA250.
The Dutton Ranch. We're back in business.
You heard right. Let's go to work. I'm glad you're making friends, honey.
You're every bit as advertised.
You're damn right he is.
Fighting the good fight, buddy.
Kevin Sorbo here, and I have an important message to share.
The government needs more money, your money. If you owe the IRS back taxes, they can garnish your wages and levy your bank accounts. They can even seize your retirement or take your home. Don't let the IRS target you. Call the professionals at Tax Network USA. Their tax lawyers and enrolled agents are experts in powerful programs that may even help you eliminate your tax debt.
Call for a free consultation or visit tnusa.com.
What if I told you you can get a brand new metal roof from Erie Home for 50% off the installation? Now you can. Our metal roofs are proven to withstand 120 miles per hour wind and 2-inch hail, all backed by a 50-year warranty. Call now for your free estimate.
Hello, this is Franklin Graham. Samaritan's Purse is responding to the deadly earthquakes that struck Venezuela on the 24th of June. 2 back-to-back earthquakes. Hundreds and thousands of people have been injured. Thousands of people are missing. The people are hurting. Samaritan's Purse has taken a field hospital. We've got doctors and nurses, and we're responding right now to the people that have lost so much. We've taken water purification. We've taken solar lights, a lot of things. We need your prayers and we need your help. God bless you.
A powerful blast was felt at an apartment complex in Tacoma, Washington. It happened as local fire workers were investigating a report of smoke coming from an electrical room. Video footage before the blast shows firefighters trying to open the door to the electrical room. Once successful, a flurry of thick smoke can be seen rolling out of the room. Seconds later, an explosion. Windows shattered everywhere, and those nearby can be heard shouting, "Oh my God." Here's the incredible thing. The Tacoma Fire Department says not one firefighter nor one resident was injured in the blast. And another horrifying story, nearly 2,500 miles away from that blast. The horror story is in a rural area of Ohio. On Tuesday, 16 children from 18 months to 18 years are found inside a home, but this is no ordinary home. The conditions inside are absolutely deplorable. At a press conference, Vinton County Sheriff Ryan Kane discussed the condition in which the 16 children were found.
Most of our livestock was kept in better conditions than the children. It was extremely high presence, I'm sure, of bacterial and human feces. It was just a disgusting scene.
The children's parents and 2 grandparents have been charged with felony child endangerment. Coming up, weight loss drugs could be getting a whole lot cheaper, but there's a catch. I'll ask the Assistant Secretary for Health at HHS when the record continues.
Joe Biden became mentally impaired. Kamala was born that way.
He's back. President Trump mounted a stunning comeback to take back the White House. Even in real danger, he never lost his sense of humor. Watch The Comeback.
Every day across the globe, big business agendas go unseen by investors. Things that go against your core values and beliefs. It's time to know your investments. Abortion, alternative lifestyles, gender and identity confusion. If you believe in protecting marriage and life, children, innocence, guarding masculinity, restoring families, defending religious liberty, invest with your values. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Where's the admission desk at your hospital? You may need it sooner than you think. It's the middle of the night and you, your spouse, or your child is sick, high fever, can't keep anything down, and getting worse. Now you're waiting in the ER, and everyone gets seen before you. And when I finally see you and order prescriptions, you still have to wait for your pharmacy to open and hope they have what I prescribed. This is the medical emergency kit. It's stocked with essential medications, including amoxicillin, generic Z-Pak, and ivermectin. Now you have the right medications when you need them. And it's why I and so many of my colleagues have medical emergency kits. It's like having an urgent care and pharmacy in your home. Just fill out a brief online medical intake and your kit, prescribed by a licensed provider, is shipped to your door. Here's how to order.
Order your kit now and save $45. Visit urgentcarekit.com/news. That's urgentcarekit.com/news.
As an athlete, I think I just always understood sleep as part of the performance equation. It was physical recovery. Especially as a mom, I think sleep has taken on an entirely new meaning for me. It's mental recovery, it's sanity, it's how I show up not just for my daughter, but for my work, even myself. And I think I used to think sleep was something you pushed through, and now I really think of it as something you protect.
Sattva, unlock the superpower of restorative sleep.
Your neighbor just paid an enormous amount for a new roof, but he didn't have to, and neither do you. Because Newsmax can add years of life to your current roof.
Here's how you know you have a problem with your roof. Black streaking, your roof looks rough, or granules shedding off into your gutters or showing up in your driveway. Your roof is wearing out too fast, and it's going to cost you a bundle. Newsmax makes your roof like new by strengthening and rejuvenating it.
Get your roof treated now, but pay later, with no payments for a full year.
Honey, Mortgage Money 6 says we should keep renting.
Mortgage Money 6?
Reba says more realtor agents recommend Realtor.com. They track every market so you know when to make your move.
He also says that Bigfoot... Got it.
Make it real with Realtor.com.
There is health news, and it is good news. Medicare will now cover weight loss drugs. Some Medicare patients will only have to pay a $50 monthly copay for some GLP-1s or weight loss drugs. So who is eligible? What is the approval process? And could an increased demand, now that they're cheaper for some, cause a shortage? Assistant Secretary for Health at the Health and Human Services, Admiral Brian Christine, joins me. Nice to see you, sir.
It is great to see you, Greta. Thanks for having me on today.
This is a big deal because these drugs are expensive.
They are. It's another example of President Trump and Secretary Kennedy delivering wins every day for the American people, because GLP-1s, which can be incredibly effective for diabetes, or in this case, obesity, they are very expensive, and that can be a barrier. But this program is going to drop those walls for individuals who have Medicare who are eligible for the program.
Well, what took so long, not to drop the prices, but it was used for diabetes, Ozempic, for 25 years, and all of a sudden now it's the miracle drug. Well, why didn't we know that sooner?
Well, the action, what GLP-1s do is they certainly regulate blood sugar, but what they also do is they tend to give a sense of fullness. They slow down emptying from the stomach, so you feel fuller, you eat less, so it turns out they can be incredibly effective when combined with lifestyle changes, when combined with diet, like eating per our dietary guidelines. You put those things together with GLP-1s, they can really make a difference in weight loss.
Well, I think I read that that you could get Medicare will do the $50 copay if you're getting it for certain problems, not for all. Weight loss is not one of them, but you can do it for cardiovascular problems. Cardiac problems often are because you have too much weight. So you'd think that a weight issue is really a heart issue.
Well, chronic disease, we talk at HHS about wanting to fight chronic disease, and certainly 70% of Americans have a chronic disease of some description. 40% of Americans are obese, and so obesity really it's a crisis in this country, and that's what we're looking at with this program, the Medicare GLP-1 Bridge. Medicare beneficiaries who are eligible will get these medications for $50 a month to help fight obesity.
Well, are these GLP-1s all the same? I mean, you've got Ozempic and Wegovy are with something called semaglutide. I don't even know what that is. And then Zepbound and Mounjaro have something else. Are they different and do different things?
They're a little bit different, but ultimately the effect is the same in that, again, they're affecting blood sugar levels for the diabetic, but in this case, for obesity, they really do help with weight loss. But the thing is, they're simply not magic. You do have to combine these with lifestyle changes, and we hammer that home to people. You have to eat better. You have to get out and get exercise. It's not just the medication, because if an individual stops these medicines and they don't have those lifestyle changes, many people will put the weight right back on. So this is part of a program, a whole life-changing program, the medication, but with good diet and good exercise.
I mean, they're also anti-inflammatories, right?
Yes.
Okay, so, and arthritis is an inflammatory problem. It's not recommended for arthritis, but it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that would an off-label purpose be? Are we sometime going to assume that it's going to help people who have terrible arthritis if arthritis is an inflammatory problem and if these are anti-inflammatory.
Well, this is certainly directed toward the obesity issue there. So in terms of the others, don't know, but in terms of obesity or diabetes, tremendous difference. Again, this program very specifically to help those Medicare beneficiaries who need to lose weight, who need to fight obesity.
And that started yesterday, July 1.
It's something that I know that Dr. Oz is incredibly proud of, and of course, Secretary Kennedy and our President Donald Trump really proud of this.
Admiral, thank you for joining me, and thank you for your service, not just at HHS. Thank you, sir.
Very much.
Thank you, sir.
God bless you, and have a very happy 4th.
And a very safe one, and not an overly heated one. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Coming up, American fitness trainer and best-selling author Jillian Michaels joins me next. What do you think she thinks about the Supreme Court's ruling on transgender athletes? Short answer, a lot. That when the record continues.
Get in, loser. We're going shopping.
A Sunday morning of last
Yummy.
indulging in myself
As if.
Fantastic.
That's what I've been saying.
I got sand in my butt. I can't hardly walk.
Steal my sunshine.
I love what I do, which is help people make the switch to consumer cellular. Like our customers, Courtney and Jackie.
Anytime anybody complains about their cell phone bill, we say, you've got to check out Consumer Cellular.
Consumer Cellular gives you access to a fast, reliable, nationwide network for up to half the cost of big wireless.
My previous provider was terrible.
Why are we paying this much for our cell phone bill? It's crazy, right?
Dropped calls or missed calls. To me, that was just normal.
We wouldn't get to talk to a person. Now with Consumer Cellular, no problems.
Our reception is so much better with Consumer Cellular. It's been amazing.
I just made a road trip across half the country, and I did not have one dropped call.
Better customer service. They tell me exactly what I'm paying and why I'm paying for it.
And here's my favorite part. You can save up to half on your bill.
It's within $1 of being half of my old bill.
With Verizon, I was paying about $150 a month. With Consumer Cellular, I'm paying about half that.
As AARP members, we get 2 lines for $55 a month.
I'm getting the exact same coverage for half the price. That's a beautiful thing. Done deal.
We'll set you up with the best plan for you and help you wrap things up with your old provider. It all takes about 20 minutes. Switching over took about 20 minutes. That's it.
Consumer Cellular customer service reps are A1, top notch.
They are so nice. You get a human being to talk to.
It's month to month, very simple. You're not locked in.
I got to keep my phone. I got to keep my number.
If you're thinking about switching providers, do it.
If I can do it, you can. That's why I love Consumer Cellular. They've made it easy.
We'd love for you to enjoy our reliable nationwide coverage and the best customer service in the business. Give us a call now and start saving up to half on what you're paying now.
Call 800-378-8904.
And save big during the Consumer Cellular Summer Switch event. Save up to 50% off your bill, and right now, save an extra $50 with code SAVE50.
Now, tirzepatide for weight management is available in a dissolvable tablet. It's not the injection and doesn't offer the same strength or clinical evidence as the injectable form, and results will differ from the injection. But for patients who don't want shots, this tablet option is worth exploring. Understanding results will differ from the injection. Tirzepatide tablets are a prescription that starts with a telehealth evaluation by a licensed physician who reviews your health history. And if it's right for you, they prescribe it. This might be worth a conversation.
Doesn't get much better than that, does it? That's right. What a thrill for us Americans. America's soccer team is moving on in the World Cup. Last night, Team USA defeated Bosnia-Herzegovina 2-0. The next match for the U.S. is Monday against Belgium. But the USA team will have to play without a top player. Folarin Balogun is the top scorer, but he received a red card penalty for serious foul play. What was considered the foul play? For stepping on the ankle of a Bosnian defender while both were going after the ball. At first, Balogun did not get a red card, but when a referee reviewed the play in slow motion, he found Balogun had dragged his cleat down the back of the defender's leg and onto his foot. Following the red card, he was immediately ejected and suspended for the next match. Unfortunately, the team cannot appeal the suspension. Meanwhile, a WNBA player claims she is receiving death threats. Last week, the Phoenix Mercury was playing the Indiana Fever. Alyssa Thomas from Phoenix put her fist to Caitlin Clark's throat. Senior correspondent John Huddy joins me with the latest. John?
Yeah, well, Greta, for those of our viewers who don't follow the WNBA, Alyssa Thomas is a forward for the Phoenix Mercury, who, as you just mentioned, put her fist on the throat of Indiana Fever point guard Caitlin Clark during a pretty rough game last week. Now, Thomas said it was unintentional, but there's been a firestorm really on social media about whether Clark, the WNBA superstar, and really essentially the face of the league, is being unfairly targeted by other players. Now, no foul was called after Thomas and Clark scrambled for a loose ball, as you see there during the game June 24th in Indianapolis. Clark, who's among the few white, straight, and Christian players in the league, left the game ultimately with an injury. Well, Thomas, who is black and openly gay, later received a $1,000 fine after the game and a one-game suspension. Since the incident, Thomas complained that her team was being, quote, painted as thugs, and that she's faced harassment and racial backlash online, even death threats as well, as you were talking about. Now, Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White, instead of really addressing the lack of a foul during the game or even previous incidents between both teams and players possibly even targeting her star player, instead gave a lecture about inclusivity, homophobia, and racism. Here's part of it.
Before we start with questions, I just want to address, what's going on with AT. I think first and foremost, it's absolutely unacceptable. I think as a league, as a whole, there's been so much more toxicity, racism, homophobia, straight out like nonsense, hate nonsense. And it is absolutely unacceptable.
Well, Tuesday, the WNBA released a statement condemning, quote, any and all forms of hate. But Greta, some question if the WNBA has a bigger problem at this point among its own players. Greta?
John, Huddy, thank you. And the chambers are empty. It's vacation time, and a big one, 3 months long. This week, the Supreme Court dropped its last case and then fled the building. The term ended with the 9 justices issuing big rulings. On Tuesday, the Supreme Court ruled on transgender athletes in school sports. The justices upheld state laws banning those athletes from competing against girls. Who supports the ruling?
Yeah, that sounds like the right result. That's common sense and I think what we expected.
That, of course, was Speaker Mike Johnson. As an aside, it's not just the Supreme Court that has left town on holiday. Congress is also on recess for the July 4th holiday. Congress comes back to work on July 13. Meanwhile, President Trump backs the Supreme Court's ruling on transgender athletes. He called it a big win. The decision from the High Court allows these states on your screen to keep their bans in place. Earlier, I spoke with host of Keeping It Real podcast, Jillian Michaels. Jillian, nice to talk to you.
Same. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. And I must note that you've had a really long and successful podcast, so I tip my hat to that because you've been a trailblazer on podcasts.
Oh, thank you so much. It's certainly the farthest thing from a Joe Rogan, but I keep chipping away at it.
Well, you do a good job. All right, transgender athletes. What do you think about the Supreme Court's decision, and did you expect it?
I was praying for it. Obviously, that says everything about what I think about it. I'm exceptionally grateful because it protects biological girls in sports. Did I expect it? Anything is possible nowadays in our political climate, but I'm exceptionally grateful.
Well, for women my age, and I was the last year when there was no Title IX. When Title IX came around, it was the most liberating thing for women and girls. It made a level playing field because we had nothing to do at school until then. And then so many opportunities opened up. And so what I don't understand, fast forward to 2026, is suddenly a lot of women who embraced Title IX and realized what it did for women, suddenly they thought it was a bad idea, that it hurt other people, transgenders.
It is so surprising that women who historically have touted themselves as feminists are now the greatest opposition to fairness for women in the game. But, what are we going to do except continue to fight the good fight? And the reality is that everybody should be treated with dignity and respect. But the personal choices of the few should never supersede the fairness and the safety of the many. It's absurd. It is ridiculous. It is simply biological reality that males are stronger, fitter, and faster than females. It is a fact, and we've known it since the history of humanity.
You know, it's interesting. Martina Navratilova, very left-wing, but she has been opposed to the curbing of Title IX and letting transgenders compete, and she's sort of bucking the system within sort of her flank of the party.
Well, that's because she knows if men had competed against her back in her day, there would be no Martina Navratilova. There's a very famous clip of Serena Williams. I think she was talking about playing Andy Roddick, I believe, on Letterman, and saying, like, I would never want to play him. I could never win. He would win every straight set. And that was before this was ideological, when we were all just functioning off of common sense. She's like, I could never win one game, and that is one of the greatest female athletes in the history of tennis. So thank God for people like Martina Navratilova speaking common sense in the area of their expertise, because goodness knows the world needs it.
You know, I mean, besides the fact it's cutting opportunity, there's also a risk. I mean, that you can get hurt if you're playing against someone bigger, but that happens in even you know, a woman giving an elbow to the eye of another woman in volleyball can cause damage. I mean, there's that, but there's also for many the discomfort in the locker room. I mean, there's so many elements to this, and and when you even do sort of a balance test, that what gets slighted is, I guess, the transgenders feel they can't compete. Although I suspect that we could come up with another solution.
Of course. I mean, the reality is when it comes to a locker room, I'm sure you can find a private place to change. That could be easily rectified. But the reality is that there have been numerous studies with regard to boys that have been put on puberty blockers that are now transgender girls, and they are still significantly stronger and more fit than biological females, even when they take these medications before puberty. So what I would recommend is that if you are a person who is transgender and you want to play, you can play with the boys and you can take the safety risk and the fairness disadvantage, because this is a choice that you are making, so you should be responsible for that choice.
Do you have any idea why we're seeing so much of it now? I mean, is it that we looked the other way years ago and didn't? But why is this an issue now rather than even 30 years ago?
Why are a lot of things an issue now that they weren't 30 years ago? Why are socialists taking over New York City? I mean, it really is a broad spectrum of radical ideology that is infiltrating our cultural zeitgeist. And I honestly couldn't possibly explain it to you outside of the fact that I do think there are radical factions that are infiltrating our culture, not for the better, and this is a victory that we desperately needed.
Well, I don't think it was a big surprise that this was the way the court was going to rule, and I think we're going to see more states creating those bans as time marches on. So this was a victory for at least Title IX. That's the way I look at it. Women, they don't get the setback that they would if they had to compete against men or transgenders.
Thankfully not. Thankfully not.
Very nice to talk to you. Hope you come back.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Have a good one.
Coming up, who gives a 2-year-old a Big Mac? Find out when the record continues.
The Shady Rays Independence Day sale is live now with up to 50% off on all sunglasses. That's premium polarized sunglasses made to keep up with real life, durable, comfortable, and backed by lost and broken protection if life happens. Yes, really, we replaced lost and broken sunglasses, so the next time your day brings an unexpected surprise, we've got you covered. Get the quality your eyes deserve and head to ShadyRays.com to get your new favorite pair today.
Hey, I'm Dr. Drupinski. I've been looking at the aging process for a long time. Fatty 15 actually slows it down. Fatty 15 comes out of Navy dolphin research. Without the C15, our cells become fragile and age and oxidize. This pushes that back. That's why I take Fatty 15.
IRAs and 401ks were designed to account for a 2% rate of inflation. The idea was you could apply a 4% withdrawal rate and it would last. Inflation is at 3.8%. But when you account healthcare, insurance, food, and energy, the real rate is 8%. Gold's role isn't to make you rich. It's to help you survive what's coming. Call Patriot Gold Group at 1-800-778-4156. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold and silver dealer nationwide. The only firm nationwide where you, the client, work directly with an owner. Home of the America 250 no fee for life IRA. Call 1-800-778-4156 and see how easy it is to protect your IRA with physical gold and silver. Call now, 1-800-778-4156.
What if you're sick at home or traveling and can't get medical help or prescriptions? Doctors say a medical emergency kit is the answer. Joining me is Dr. Drew.
Thank you. And yes, these kits put you in charge of your health. They come with physician-prescribed medication to treat multiple common and some serious issues as well.
What are some examples?
Sure. Generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, other essential antibiotics and antivirals that treat flu, pneumonia, strep, ear infections, sinus infections, urinary tract infections, and more.
So it is like urgent care and a pharmacy at home?
Exactly. No waiting, no pharmacy, no copays. You feel better faster and avoid serious complications.
How do you know what medicines to take?
You just match your symptoms to the doctor-written guide or schedule a quick telehealth call.
Sound advice. Order online in minutes at the website below and save $45. Thank you, doctor.
Visit urgentcarekit.com/news, promo code news.
Don't kibble your dog.
Hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, back.
What's wrong with this?
Let's check it out. It's still kibble, which means they're ultra-processed. At Dr. Marty, we freeze-dried premium meats, fruits, and vegetables, and it's available at your local pet store.
When Conor McGregor fights, you're witnessing something once in a lifetime.
Surprise, surprise, the king is back!
All my life I want money and power.
Oh! Conor McGregor transcended the sport! Max Holloway! That's a real warrior! I'm right here! You're in for a treat!
McGregor versus Holloway, Saturday, July 11th. Free with your subscription, only on Paramount Plus.
Here's a question for you. What is the best birthday treat? Humans might say a cake. What about someone who's not human, like a zoo animal? Well, this giraffe at the Maryland Zoo just turned 2. His name is Big Mac. So for his birthday, the staff made him burgers. Giraffes are notoriously plant eaters, leaves, grasses, fruits, so the birthday boy did not get real burgers. He got vegetarian burgers. The staff also threw in a side of vegetarian cookies. So how did Big Mac, by the way, get his name? When he was born, his name was chosen through a public naming contest, and Big Mac was the name that was the winner. Don't forget, I have a new podcast called Greta. You'll like it. It's different. You can subscribe now on your favorite podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at newsmax.com/listen. It's free, so sign up, please. Thank you for watching. Ed Henry, The Big Take is next. Stay with Newsmax.